Welcome to Psyched by MG. This is Mary Grace Randazzo-Ratliff, or MG for short. I've been a psychotherapist in private practice for 32 years now. Guess what, everyone? We all have issues. So it's time to lighten up and move forward. Let's stop letting our crap control us and take control of our crap. Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? Hello. We've got a lot going on this past week. I've been really thinking about it with the protests, and we hopefully can do a show next week on it because it's really hard to just talk about it and not like go deeper.
Oh yeah, because if we start that we could talk a long time about that.
I know, and it's such a special month because this is Gay Pride Month.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to stay focused on that. But I do want people to know the protest that's going on out there is very important to talk about. I want to get to it, but I want to give it time. Don't you agree, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's going to be an ongoing thing for a while, which in a way it should be. And again, we'll get into all that when we hit on that. But
yeah. I mean, I think it's so important, and I understand what's going on, and but I want to definitely acknowledge it, and I want everyone to know we're taking it very seriously. And it's about discrimination, and we have an important topic of that tonight, in what the poor LGBTQ community goes through. And so we first want to say to everyone and all of our family in the LGBTQ community, we give you warm welcome and happy Gay Pride Month.
Yes.
And we're so excited to be doing this show tonight.
A couple more acronyms. It's LGBTQI and A. So the I is for intersex, and A is for allies. So when we see a lot of people see the equal sign and kind of what does that represent, and people, it's not just a gay pride, it's not just a silo kind of separate pride, it's just human pride, because allies are part of that pride. So
yeah,
right.
Yeah. I mean, I have decided to share something tonight, Matthew Barita. I'm a proud mom of a young man who came out to his mom just a few weeks ago. So I'm having to process, love my son dearly, and want to do everything I can in my power to support him and to just let him know how much we love him. And we only care about, I want him happy. Matthew and I have talked about this. I want him happy, and I want him in a safe relationship, a good, thriving relationship. And I want him to have a great journey, discovering who he is. And so this is a very special month for me, as I'm celebrating my son.
Awesome.
So when I watched that movie, let's talk about a secret.
Well, and we'll lead into that because I mean, this brings up, and again, as a mother and as a parent, I know, and again, many friends in the past too, that our concern is for the discrimination they're going to experience as they go through life, and it's just sad that we have to that's your first thought is, oh no, what are they gonna do and say, and of course as a parent, that's what your concern is.
Yeah, and we had to talk about, we had some really good conversations this week, and we had to talk about college. And I said, he sees himself as bi, and I said, how do we handle the roommate situation? What do we do? I want you to have the experience of having a roommate and meeting people and all that, but how do we do it? And what is going to be comfortable for you? And we just kind of sat with that a little bit. We haven't come to any conclusions. And then we talked about, what if you have somebody who's homophobic, who's your roommate? How are you going to handle it? What are you going to do? And I was so impressed with my son. He's like, Mom, I'm going to go to the RA and get a new roommate. And I was like, good, good, honey, you got it. He said, I'm not going to argue. I said, you don't fight. You can't change opinions. So just the key is I want you to be careful and safe, and I want you comfortable.
Or the idealist in me says he has a homophobic roommate who gets to know him and realizes how wrong they are.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
It
The thing
happens
that's
to
tough
people.
about that, because that seems so ideal.
That's why it is idealistic.
I wish it'd be one thing if he came up against that with somebody who wasn't living with him every day. And I don't want his energy to be spent on, changing and fixing this person. So it's true. I mean, it opens up so many issues and questions that I think are so important for everyone to get comfortable talking about.
Well, I think too, it's about the humility component of being in that level of open-mindedness, which I think as a parent, but even as a friend and as an ally, and I think sometimes too, the greatest gift is sometimes getting next to that pain, and there is so much pain that has been it's historically embedded, and it's still, when you think about like just LGBTQIA, and it's like even for allies, it's like there's so much discrimination and there's so much kind of energy that is misplaced and misappropriated, just meaning that it's, there's this external aggression where, because people just are unfamiliar, and people, it's interesting how just a little bit of uncomfortable kind of feelings can lead to so much disaster and so much pain. And I think that's where having these conversations and being humble about it too, of like, even as a parent or even as friends, and as myself as a gay male, it's like having people ask me questions is the most rewarding thing that people can do, and oftentimes they don't recognize that. And so from like in that kind of cisgender culture of like someone who's heteronormative and who maybe doesn't understand, it's not an insult to tell people you don't understand. And I think that's also what you were alluding to at the beginning with, kind of talking about next week when we're talking about just the kind of race and, the kind of culture that's going on right now. And some people even call it a culture war. And with the kind of lesbian and gay and bisexual and transgender and heteronormative and, or heteroattractionality. And I talk about it with my students and patients about from an attractionality standpoint, because then it almost reduces some of that venom and it reduces the notion of that, like, it's a choice. It's more of like, what's happening with your body, right? And we've been talking on these podcasts, this stream of consciousness about like paying attention to our bodies, paying attention to those, and Mary Grace, you say a lot, pay attention to those signals in your body, right? So like it's, if you're feeling anxious, it's a sign, it's your body is speaking to you. And that's the same thing. It's like teaching your son, teaching, my friends, even how like, if I'm feeling something, then, let's learn together how we can both respond to this, as opposed to it's just a one person fixes it problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's created these silos of, well, I don't think like you, I don't feel like you, I'm not attracted like you, I don't attract myself to the same people as you. So I must just, this is just a lost cause. And it's a very defeatist mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, people don't know how to talk about it. And how many times we have to say, it's, you got to just come out and say, I don't know how to talk about it. This subject makes me so insecure. And there's really good people out there that they're so afraid to offend that they won't talk about it. So then I say that I want to do this and I don't want to offend anybody, but how do we talk about it? And you get that awkwardness right out there from the very beginning. I mean, I think about my son and what he went through to tell me. He was struggling. I mean, and I'm a really accepting parent, but he was struggling. And finally he just had so much tension. I said, what is up? You don't get like this unless something's going on. Like, what's happening? And he finally told me. And I went, oh my God, all I do is love you right now. It's okay. We are going to love you no matter what. And he just took a nice deep breath. And I thought to myself, oh my God, all those poor souls whose parents don't accept them. Like the rejection and the discrimination is coming from their families.
I quickly, I had a very close friend I used to work with way back when. Actually, it was kind of probably right around when I met you, Mary Grace, and I won't use real names. I'll call her Amy. Let's just do that. And was disowned by her parents. Like she had to move out. They just said, we're done. You're gone.
And how much bravery when you are different, that the work you have to do to become secure with yourself, the work you have to do to overcome, letting someone else tell you that you're okay. Let someone else tell you what is right and wrong for you. And it takes a lot of bravery. And for kids, I mean, they're looking at their families as unconditional love and acceptance. And these poor kids that don't get that go out and deal with these issues alone in the world. They don't have those families who have their backs, who support them and say, no matter what, you can land here. We love you. We care about you. And it's unconditional. It's tough.
Well, really and it leads us into this film, this movie. And for those of you who don't know, you can probably see my background if I move my head.
A Secret Love.
It's A Secret Love.
David, thank you so much for putting that up there, and not Star Trek this week. I wanted Secret Love.
Oh, I know. No more.
There you go. You have it. You have Secret Love.
I was like jumping inside. I'm like, oh my gosh, how does he do that? Like, I wanted.
Yeah.
There you go. It's there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
The whole thing.
With Terry Donahue and Pat Henschel, I think.
Henschel.
Henschel. Yeah. I mean, this love story that went 65 years, and they did not tell their family until they were 62 years in this relationship. And what a love story. And for people who haven't seen it, this doc is, I would say it's definitely a documentary, not a movie. It was a documentary. And their relationship, I felt like they gave you a little snippet of some of the things that they went through. I wish more time in the film was spent on the real journey of struggle. They briefly mentioned, Terry mentioned she's the smaller, more petite woman, and she was the baseball player.
Yeah.
Terry played, baseball. I can't remember the name of the baseball team, but anyway. But Terry mentioned about her brother being homophobic, and that her mother would have disowned her if she came out to her. And so Terry and Pat, they were known as the aunties to the family, and just really good friends throughout their life. And but Terry's father was the one that accepted Pat. He was just happy that Pat was such a good person for Terry. Then, I kept waiting to hear about Pat's family story, and I didn't feel like we got a lot.
And I know if you've watched this, and well, we're going to discuss it. So if you haven't watched it and you don't want spoilers, maybe you wait for the podcast and listen to it later. But
right.
But Pat was very she's a little salty, let's say, a little more stern, a little more like rough, let's say. But I think it was kind of like almost, and not in a weird way, but almost a motherly role for her to take care of Terry, and because she loved her so much, she was like, she wanted to protect her.
Yeah.
Well, at one point she mentioned a couple times that she's like, her happiness is all that matters to me. Like, and she was like, my love for her is like what really matters. And I think that's where, you know, when you're, for even for all the listeners and for people watching, it's like when you're thinking about, you know, the pain, and you're thinking about the secrets that you're kind of, whether either kind of inadvertently forced into a secret, or, you know, advertently forced into, being bold. And it comes in stages to be bold, and having people who, like Mary Grace, like David, like all, you know, it's not about giving them the, like, I approve of what you're doing or who you love. It's the acceptance. And I think that's where a lot of times it's kind of bridging those gaps, where it's like, even when I've talked to clients who, you know, whether they're trans or lesbian or gay, and it's like, you know, working through that, you know, it's not about somebody giving, it's not about someone giving you their acceptance. It's about you feeling whole and what you can do to feel whole as a person yourself. And so it's praying to be bold, you know, or if you, you know, whatever non-denominational that you agree or, you know, like believe in, or if you believe in a bottle of ketchup, I don't, you know, it's like, but believing in something.
Ketchup is good.
Kind of to guide you and to have that guided light. And, you know, the idea, when you think about it, 65 years, over a half a century, right? And it's like the idea that literally their love and their bond is what has created this force field, if you will, this incubation against naysayers, against, you know, the culture, especially at that time. And when you watch the documentary, you know, you hear the music, and it's very nostalgic for people of a certain age, and that generationally speaking, and but it still brings you back. And like Mary Grace, you said about that level of safety and feeling secure. And I do this exercise with clients where, and even myself, because we're all clients too. And it's like, when's the last time you felt safe? When's the first time you felt safe, right? And this is a painful kind of exercise, because for some people who don't feel safe, or who have felt that they've had to keep secrets, it's painful. And it continually diminishes that. And you've, you know, we'll get to that a little bit later, Mary Grace, that you'll point out, but it's like that lowered self-esteem, that lowered, you know, kind of that feeling isolated, and what that does to a person.
Oh, terrible. I mean, we talk about isolation in with so many issues. And, you know, when you feel like you aren't accepted, but not only you're not accepted, but danger can come to you. I mean, that's a beautiful intro into, you know, the 1960s raids that they showed on the show, that they lived in Chicago. She played baseball in Chicago. Terry did. And Pat played hockey, I believe.
Yes.
And they would raid any bar. And they said they were afraid to go to the bars. They did only party. Most of the gay population at that time only did parties, because if they were in a raid at a bar, their names and families and jobs were listed in the newspaper. And people would lose their jobs, lose their families. It was a horrific exploitation of these poor people. It was, you know, at that time, the 1960s version of the Scarlet Letter. They would put a scarlet letter on these poor people. And how wrong that was, and how ignorant it was. And so how the gay community compensated was to go ahead and just have these parties. And that's how they could be with each other and celebrate and have fun. And it's also so sad. I mean, they couldn't be in public at all. They couldn't go out to the bars, and the constant fear of danger, the constant fear of judgment. And so when you look at how Pat, especially, and Terry kind of cocoon themselves, you can understand it. as therapists, you kind of go, well, what was going on within the family? But in this situation, it's like, wow, which, is it due just because being gay was so threatening that cocoon was present? And I know that's a question I had when I was watching the film. Yeah, so they had no role models.
Well, and if they did too, and that's the thing, if they did, they were equally in the same atmosphere and in the same culture, going through their own fears and living in the same, the role models were also living in that same time period of, kind of and dare I say, a lynch mob mentality. And so, and it still goes on. And and even today, there's certain, obviously there's certain things that are still going on. And, people, I think, I forget exactly who said it, but it was, they were referring to a lot of, the kind of race culture and the war on that right now. And they were saying, like, it's been going on, now it's just more videotaped. Right. And I think the same thing with the LGBTQIA. It's like, and with this film too, it does represent this timepiece of when you look at it then to now it's just everything is more videotaped. When you're seeing people who, are kind of externalizing their insecurities and their aggression, and it pushes somebody. And for us, obviously, we've seen it. We work with people to try to help them become more whole and spread out. And, and we do that in different ways. And I think, even for myself, I think, for my own personal growth of finding people this could make me cry. Mary Grace, and like, having people in your life who allow you, but it's more of a humble agape love, who allow you to be your own unique self and the authentic self, is the greatest gift you can give to somebody. It's a privilege to hear other people's lives and be in their lives. And when you have that reciprocal kind of determinism between two people, I mean, it's the gift that keeps on giving, because it creates the healing. And then you learn, well, wait a minute, my heart was broken, but I'm not broken. My whole agency is not broken. And the constitution of me is not broken. And I think kind of leading into, and I think that's also what created that, healthy kind of, for themselves, they became each other's role models, with Terry and Pat. Kind of, that's what incubated their relationship, because they leaned on each other and allowed each other to be themselves, and it allowed them to thrive within themselves.
Yeah.
And you talk about the role, like Mary Grace, you mentioned role models within their circle. And again, they had lifelong friends who supported them and loved them. The two gentlemen that they came in later in the movie, that was their family.
Yeah.
And that's, and it's unfortunate it wasn't their biological family, but they did get that love and respect and acceptance from those friends.
Yeah. I mean, that was just making me think, wow, for Pat, I mean, Terry had more family members that were accepting, and actually, some of them are like, I didn't even think about it, but how come it took you so long? And I mean, they had the right to ask that question. And what they were trying to say with that statement is, we love you and accept you no matter what. And, we wish you could have just known that about our relationship. That's what that statement is about. Well,
and the niece specifically, the main niece who was very supportive throughout the whole movie. And again, I don't want to jump around, but it just, I want to put this out, so I'll forget it. But the one family member, I don't know if it was another niece or not, one of the comments was, well, yeah, I know they're gay, but I wish they would just get married so they stop living in sin. Like just the twisted, that line just stuck with me throughout the whole movie. It's like, what?
it's a twisted thing, but it's, again, like, so how do I explain it? When you hear that she's missing so much of their picture in their life, like it needs to be more about, wow, you guys have been through so much. Geez, that you had to hide like that. Oh, I got to sit with that. That lets me know the pain that you must have been under.
And then my sassy self wants to say, listen, bitch, I'm living in sin because of you.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. We were forced to live in sin. How's that?
Yeah.
And realistically, who gets to define that? Next, like, and it's like, when you get to push back on that, and it's like, oh, so you get to define my sin? No.
Right. Right.
I know. And I also want to, just address for a minute the people that have lived in such a cocoon, like they don't even let themselves venture to this, so that they can open up, who end up being judgmental due to their ignorance, that I want to say to them, please at least hear the pain. Please understand what leads them to not get married, what leads them to live the way that they do, that you also judge. And I had a relative, I was at her house and there was a march. And it was a gay march. It was a gay pride march. And she said, I accept those people, but why do they have to be out there with it? Why do they have to even be doing that in public? And I had to just take a nice deep breath. And I did not know about my son. I wasn't, but I looked at her and I said, oh my gosh, are you kidding? You have shoved them so far into the closet. You have quieted them. People have made them believe that there's something wrong with them. They have been judged and ridiculed. There's a point when you have been victimized so much that a part of getting strong and healthy is you have to gain a voice. You have to say, you don't define me. You have to say, I am not going to accept the way you view me. And you have to yell that, because people who judge want you silent and in the closet and quiet. And so that march is gaining voice. It's saying, you can try to scare me. Guess what? I'm not scared. I am strong enough to be who I am. And my little cousin looked at me and she said, well, and I said, I really hope you understand that before you make that judgment, and you do have a judgment here, that you attempt in your because I come from Catholic families, in your Catholic way and in your belief in God, connect with the pain of that. If you want to get in there and have an opinion and have a thought, you better connect right with pain first. And then tell me where you land. And I think that's so important, that we get this out so that family members who are shaken, friends, relatives who are not supporting these wonderful, beautiful individuals who, can have these absolutely, or already have these amazing lives and abilities, that if you're struggling with that pain, you better get out of yourself and think about what they're going through, because it's hard.
Well, and I also, for everyone who's listening to that, and to kind of echo what you're saying, is that I want people to know that we love you. And it was interesting, earlier on in my career when I started in community mental health, and shortly after, and I was working with this one gentleman, and he was struggling in his relationship with his wife. And at the beginning, and he had asked me a question, and I was unaware how long that would have stayed with him. And we had happened to work together for over almost a couple of years. And at the beginning, I said, I love love. Yeah. And I said, I can't. And then I would say, I want to help you be you, just like I want to be me. Everyone else was taken, so I just have to be
Yes.
me. And so that's part of that kind of uniqueness and, you know, that authentic quality. And I think part of it is, like you said, Mary Grace, it's like recognizing that hurt. And sometimes, again, that gift of getting next to that is what it's not that specifically, it's what is right after that. That is so emotional. And understandably, what we do in our field of like understand, you know, why people sometimes avoid that is because that emotion is so scary sometimes. Or in addition to that, it's so scary to acknowledge that I've been wrong for 30 years. I've been wrong for 14 years. I've been wrong as, you know, and I think also too, you know, one of my colleagues recently, we were talking and it's like, I want people to move away from and just literally, but also metaphorically, but take a couple steps to the left or the right. It's not, we're not trying to have you make a right decision or a wrong decision or a good decision or a bad decision. It's just a choice. And the choice is going to bring about that change. And I think, especially with A Secret Love, it's like, you know, Terry and Pat, they made choices. And over time, the choices that they made proved to be positive. It proved to continue to unfold the blessings in their life. And they were able to continue to dream these bigger dreams.
Yeah.
And I think that's also something that, you know, the kind of message of, but also that guided almost, you know, kind of coaching to people who are struggling with, you know, wondering if, should I talk about my insecurities? Should I talk about my prejudices and discrimination and the things that I have? And it's like you were saying at the top of the show tonight, it's like actually saying to someone, I have these thoughts or feelings, but I just don't know how to say them. And that can be the start. That can get you to break the egg and kind of open it up and start to say to somebody, I'm willing to understand you, because truth be told, and this is also what probably will be talked about in next week's or future podcasts, is people of entitlement have been living their life, and people have just been understanding them their whole life. And so that's part of, like you were saying, Mary Grace, the marches. It's like the marches are to gain the voice and to say, you are going to understand me at certain times you haven't, but now you're going to. If I have to be bold and loud, I'm going to.
Exactly.
And I do, and you're right, Matthew. And it's even with that, it's just frustrating because some people are just never going to get it. And that's the disappointing thing. That's the thing that makes me sad, because I'd like to have faith in humanity in general, and I think largely I do, but it's just being kind and just being caring. It's just, we're all human beings, and differences that shouldn't, it doesn't matter, it shouldn't matter. And if everybody would just accept that, my God, we would be
so much further along.
It would just be a different world.
Oh, you know, a lot of times I will, in practice, say to people, do you really know the difference between righteousness and self-righteousness? Because if you are a Christian, if you are, you know, a Catholic, you have to know the difference. You cannot be self-righteous and judge other people. You cannot. You are not God. You cannot play God. You don't get to take the helm there. You are not to judge, you know, unless you're walking in their shoes, back off. And being righteous is about accepting differences, that, you know, those lives that are different from yours are just as valuable and just as important and deserve the same love. They deserve good love and acceptance. We do not have the right to judge.
Well, and maybe I'll make a note of this, but we need to, later on, we should probably do a podcast on how religion plays into mental health, and again, that's a whole can of worms that could
Yeah.
that could get crazy. But I think that's important because again, the again, the basic tenets, if you want to call them, of most religions should be taking care of your fellow person, loving them, being kind and gracious, and but that part seems to just disappear most of the time. It's just not even in the picture.
Yeah.
And it's also helping people to understand too that on the journey, and especially on the topic tonight, and is that helping people understand that you've been doing everything you need your entire life. And like people's minds get exploded when I like point these things out to them. It's like friends or colleagues or even, who are willing. And it's like, you have the bag of resources. You've been carrying it around your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
It's called resiliency. Pull up a seat, baby, get ready, because you're about to, get hit with a really lovely reality check in a healthy way, is that you've had a lot of these strengths. And part of it is, again, and I keep on it, obviously it's the third time I'm mentioning it, but Mary Grace, when you're talking about that voice and really like gaining that voice and that momentum, and even thinking back to my own kind of journey of being me, and kind of being very selective with my family who are my friends of choice, right? Those individuals who make up the kind of sector in my life who allow me to be in a cocoon of healing and love and compassion. And I think also too, David, like you were pointing out, is that, like having faith in humanity, it's like sometimes, and this is not, obviously, there's no easy way to put it, you can't teach someone empathy. You can't teach.
No.
So to some level, it is about, that combination of recognizing that, but then also, as Mary Grace, as you're saying, when you have that voice and you're marching, and not literally, but I mean, not always literally, but when you're marching every day, and I get up every day, and you guys get up every day, and here's the ally part. So folks, sit down, come on, allies, pull up a chair, watch our video, let's go, come on, because everyone is part of this. When you wake up every day and you're putting on your socks and your shoes and your pants, you're walking in that you're walking in your path, and you're making it easier for yourself and others. And that's part of it, is that that's really what we're trying to do, is making it easier. And when you get to that point of being easier, then that allows you to, and we talk about this in treatment, is what's the difference between surviving and thriving, right? Surviving is, oh my God, I ate one time this week, or I ate one time in 2 weeks, right? For some people who are on the much severe extreme end, right? Especially for LGBTQI youth who are, discriminated, also sometimes kicked out of their houses. And that's where the Trevor Project online is kind of originated from. And it helps those, the lesbian and gay youth, find shelter. Yeah. And it's just, when you're thinking about going back to that sense of self and having your bag filled up with, you're able, where your next meal is going to come from, where your heat and air and, your blankets are going to come from. And then you start to think, well, it's possible for me to actually meet somebody and go get a job and actually contribute, but also start receiving those kind of fruits of your labor. And Mary Grace, you talk about this a lot too, and David, is that the abundance, right? Helping people be okay. And you kicked my ass a little bit, Mary Grace. By a little bit, listeners, I'm talking about a lot, but it's basically getting you to understand that you deserve that abundance of your hard work. Yeah. And so if your voice is spreading love, then the abundance of that is you will see that around you, and being okay with that, and teaching people to spread that kind of love and that abundance so that it's not a secret no more. Yeah. Right. And a follow-up to this could be a non-secret love. I mean,
yeah. Oh, and Matthew brought up so many things I'm thinking about. I flip back and forth between, God, I just want to, give all those poor kids who, get rejected and they're homeless and feel, rejected and defective. And, I just want to give them all a hug and go, you're the ugly duckling story. You're the swan in the duck nest. And it's an old story of a swan egg that rolled into a duck nest. And as it grew, all the other ducks picked at it and condemned it and hated it. And the mother rejected it. And it finally, ran away. And it ended up with a farmer, but the farmer abused it. And it got away again. And it felt so deflated and so defeated and so ugly that it was about to kill itself. And what happened is it looked into the water one last time. In the reflection, the other swans were going by to migrate. And the swan looked up and thought, what is that? And the other swan said, come with me. Come on, it's time. We got to go. He said, what, me? And the swan was like, yeah, the other swans, come with me. And he said, well, I'm a duck. And I said, you're not a duck, you're a swan. And so the swan started to fly with them because for the first time in its life, it felt connected to. It felt like it was a part of something in a group. And the swan then learned that it was a swan and found its real family and its home and its connection. And so for kids that, sorry about that, I don't know why that's happening. For kids who are out there and really struggling with this, you gotta find your swans. Like you gotta find those people and people who are family and alliances of this. You really have to embrace everybody. Like you really, there are kids out there and people who have been rejected. And I feel like we got to do our part to get that message out there that not everybody judges. We love you. We care. You are accepted. Please get out there and prove everybody wrong. Thrive, be great, learn how to do great things, and show the world that anybody who's judging you like that is full of crap. True.
Here, Grace, you bring up something that reminds me, and I don't know if anyone has seen this, and for the viewers, please watch this, but there's a show called Prayers for Bobby. It's a movie.
Oh no, here we go.
And you mentioned giving these kids a hug. And so the show surrounds itself around it's based on a true story. A devout Christian mother, Mary Griffith, and her son, Bobby Griffith. And the movie came out 11 years ago. And he ends up identifying as homoattractional, and the mother struggles to understand. And it's almost twofold, well, more than twofold. There's so many layers, but a couple of the major ones is understanding, and then understanding with the faith that she believes in and has been indoctrinated with from her childhood then to her adulthood. And I won't give too much more away, but it is it definitely leads to a lot of pain and heartache. And there's a scene in the movie towards the end, and it just reminded me of that, is that there are people out there who, and goes to David, your point too, is that people start off one way, but it doesn't mean that they end off that way. And I think that's also part of, like you were saying, having faith in that, the kind of humanity, but also there's a lot, and again, maybe this is just more of me loving love. I believe that there's more love than there is hate, and love begets love. And so the idea of giving those hugs to those people, and for the people who are out there and who are listening and who are struggling, know that there are people out there waiting to hug you. There is a person out there waiting to talk to you around the corner. There is a person at the grocery store who's willing to give you their last paper towel or toilet paper, and it might start and spark a conversation, and you might find them to be the best friend that you always needed. And those are these kind of enigmatic things that just sometimes happen out of just happening. And I think part of it is recognizing, and there was that movement, if you remember, over a decade ago, but giving away, people holding up signs, free hugs, right?
Mhm.
And so part of that is, when you think about it across all movements, right? When you start leading with hugs and compassion and the likeness and the niceties, and you're able to meet someone kind of in that middle, it doesn't mean that you're forcing someone into submission, beating them into submission. You're loving them into understanding.
Mhm.
And I think that's the kind of crucial point, especially with this show on Netflix, A Secret Love. It wouldn't be a secret. It would just be a love. It would be a love story, because that's really what it is.
Right.
And I think, kind of a play on words would just be and what I would have loved Netflix to do is kind of put it in a kind of a shadow kind of subscript, because that's really what it does. It demonstrated that over 60 plus years, that love, and when you think about your marriages, right, when you think about people in our lives that, friendships that you've been and you've had, it does help you to overcome that and recognize. And when people say, and people will, and I'm sure they're thinking like, but what about this? That's okay. Let's talk about it. There's still someone out there who's willing to help you and willing to give you that love and that component of love. And it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse, but it's so true though.
Yeah, it really is. I wanted to mention a little bit, kind of the the cycle that I think a person can go through, if they don't come from the loving family. They don't, if they are not accepted. And when you're young and you notice you're different, or just trying to figure yourself out, you're scared. You're scared, you're
Mhm.
insecure, you're supposed to be insecure, you're supposed to be awkward. And you look up and out for validation and recognition. And then that soothes you and you feel safe. And then you look at, you test the waters on who you are, and you develop likes and dislikes. And then you kind of look out, and that family is supposed to validate you and accept you and teach you, what obstacles you may be facing. And so when you are discriminated against and judged and shushed and quieted, you are making pain and insecurity inside that person, and you're making them feel like there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. I can't be who I am. I have a defect, which creates anxiety, which creates shame, which creates awkwardness and insecurity. And so when they go to, come out of who they are out to family and friends, they become really insecure and awkward. And it's just a vicious cycle. And so that discrimination and that rejection teaches that person to have shame in themselves. And shame is a killer. Shame is at the root of drinking issues, suicidality,
Right.
Depression, all the destructive patterns. When we, peel back layers in therapy, it's just like, oh my gosh, you're beating the hell out of yourself. Where did you learn to do this? Like, what happened? Because this is learned. This is not biological. And so the poor person who deals with discrimination, the self-hate, and then the fight, because the body will click into what's called self-preservation. They'll need to preserve themselves. So they'll test again to get out there as who they are, and then they can get hurt and wounded. And it's a horrible, horrible cycle. It's heartbreaking. I mean, I wanted to, and I'm so sorry, I didn't have time, but I wanted to get the statistics on the suicide rate in the LGBTQAI community. And I actually didn't have time, but it's high. It's really high. And it breaks my heart. It's not right. It's not fair. It needs to change. And again, all of the people in Alliance who support, we have to understand these numbers. Like, we need to be there and support even other people and other kids, especially who are out there. And so, you know, my son, when he was sharing with me, and you know, of course I was like, well, is this person or that person or this person? And there were kids that surprised me. And then I would say, do their families know? On all of them, no, no. And I thought, oh my God, these poor kids, like, dang, they're going through this process with this world out in front of them, and they're not sharing with their parents. They're not telling them. And that just broke my heart. That just, I didn't like it.
In again, to kind of bring, again, to tie it in a little bit, I mean, that happens with almost everything, whether a kid's depressed or they're anxious or they have poor self-esteem or they're, you know, it's just not being able to communicate what you're feeling or who you are. That's the tragedy, and that happens. God, it probably happens more than it doesn't.
Yeah. And I want to just turn that a little bit, because I don't want to, like, when you go through anxiety and depression, that experience doesn't automatically give you the judgment, I think, that people who deal with homosexuality go through, or is
True.
with the Black community. I think it's more severe. I think the hiding is more, I think you're right. They go through a process that is similar. I think the intensity in the process and the fear in the process, because of, you know, the way society can be, some members of society can be, that it's so much harder and more intense.
Yeah, and maybe even to simplify it, it's just expressing who you are and what you're feeling. That should be just.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish everyone could just do that.
Yeah.
When that's interesting too, because it kind of touches on, and I mean, I could do like a few more shows on this, but it's
Well,
like,
let's do it.
what what you're talking about, David, is like, and Mary Grace says that it's more like the pansexual, and there's different, you know, and I've even had like where prisoners or residential, like individuals or just friends or strangers even, who, you know, the one nice thing is that I've noticed a trend of, you know, people really rejecting these harsh labels and what they do. So people want, and really for a long time, it was a binary, right? Historically, of like homosexual, heterosexual, right?
Mhm.
And so,
Right.
and then and so there's all these silos that exist. And so for a lot of people, and even tapping into, and you know, this is interesting too for people who, even when we're talking about who deal with just purely like mental health concerns, sometimes knowing what you're dealing with brings some of that relief to the person. And so even myself, when I've come into, you know, knowledge of like ipsisexual, demisexual, and those, and I was able to define myself by, and understand, like, I'm an ipsisexual person, I'm a demisexual person, meaning I thrive in a personal, you know, relationship with the intimacy, and I thrive in a relationship with the kind of intellect and cognitive kind of, you know, influences of kind of, you know, getting my brain going. Those are the things that, in addition to having that attractionality, and then it kind of touches into the physiology. And what I've noticed is when I talk to patients, but just friends in general, the conversations are so much more interesting. And it's interesting also where it goes, because people feel less, they feel less afraid, they feel less judged, they feel that they can talk about stuff. I have people who've disclosed stuff like, yeah, when I did this with this person and we were, you know, held hands, or and people disclosing things of like whether they've hugged or kissed the same sex and everything, like, and they're like, I don't know why I'm sharing this. Like, people have said that because it reduces that fear. And, you know, we talked about at the beginning of the show, Mary Grace, is like, when you don't have that fear, and when you're not afraid, you're not afraid. And so when you can help, and that's another gift that you can kind of give to somebody, and that privilege of talking to somebody and allowing them to share their life story with you. And when you can allow them to not be afraid and they take that with them, then that is a hug that they'll be able to take with them, and they'll be able to wrap themselves in it for the rest of their lives, remembering how you've kind of treated them.
Oh, so profound. So there's one thing I want to get to before we have to stop tonight. And it's how can parents help their kid? And that's a little special to my heart. I do not claim to be an expert on this. I'm just going through it. But I wrote down some things, and it's know the importance of your role in helping the child love themselves and thrive. They need your acceptance desperately. They need to, this is a hard journey, and they got to know that no matter when they go out in that world, they're not going alone. You may not understand them. It doesn't matter. Acceptance is easy. And the next thing is teach that they can help them to understand how they can protect themselves. Have those hard conversations that say, what are you going to do? Matthew, help me with this one. What are you going to do if you meet somebody who's homophobic? What are you going to do if somebody is gay bashing? How are you going to handle that situation?
It's tough.
It's tough. And we began to have those conversations.
Right. And
then read articles, get yourself educated on how to support this child. The next one is a big one. Face your own feelings and fears. Talk to a good friend who's not going to judge you about it. I had such an endearing phone call with a friend because I had shared with my own father and my son's nana and papi, and I couldn't, and they accepted him. They're like, we love him. We kind of knew we loved him. This is no big deal. And I was so shocked. I don't know why. And I was telling a friend, and all of a sudden the feelings came up and I just started crying. I said, wow, this is such an emotional experience. And the fear has to go somewhere, and the feelings have to go somewhere. So it's so important that you connect. And there's a wonderful organization called PFLAG that helps families and people who are in alliance and the gay community. It's a really wonderful organization that I want to put out there. So I'm so glad we did the show. I mean, I'm hoping everyone out there, we've done this special month, Respect, and we've hopefully contributed a little bit to supporting you. And then next week's show, I want to do something with the racial issues that are going on right now, but we're going to have to, see how that goes. It may switch, we'll see. But I think that's what we're going to do.
We have 7 days where we could be in a totally different world.
Dave, is that not the truth? Like every time I pick my head up, it's like, oh my God.
I know.
But I get it. I get what's going on out there. So guys, you can find David Wright where?
At the motorcityhypnotist.com or at counselingandtherapyassociates.com. That one's a little longer, so I know Motor City Hypnotist is easier to remember. Yeah. And that is my website, Facebook, and YouTube under Motor City Hypnotist.
Yeah, and Matthew?
Psyched by MG, and then mbaritams@gmail.com. And really, if anybody's out there listening and they wanted support, or if they're interested in, that you're struggling, definitely, I kind of, as my tag, have put my email up there too. And we'll get that up on your site too, Mary Grace, but mbarita, BURYTAMS@gmail.com. And yeah, I agree with you, Mary Grace. This was such a gift to do this show. I appreciate you and Detroit Podcast and having this platform. And it's almost a dream deferred for me, because I, knowing that these conversations can take place, and also just, I'm always on the search for giving someone a hug. So if you're one of those people out there and you find Matthew Burita giving you a hug. Don't say I didn't warn you.
Well, Matthew, well, we'll be in the studio soon, so I expect it.
Okay.
All right.
It has to be the air
I
hug.
I know. Air hug, air hug.
And you can find me, of course, Psyched by MG, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. My website is under construction, so I just want to give you a heads up. And if you want to contact me, you can message me on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. I just, want to give a big shout out to everybody and support the gay.
If I can say one more thing, there is a Black trans woman, Iana Dior, in Minneapolis over the weekend, who was attacked by a crowd of 20 individuals, and who had managed to not succumb to the violence and is recuperating. So we love you, and I love you, and we're Black Lives Matter, Black trans lives matter, and yeah.
Safe, speedy recovery, and to all the that are healing from these protests too.
And of course, thanks again to Detroit Podcast, Jamie
Detroit
and Matt Fox.
Podcast.
Or podcast, I said it wrong. It's Podcast Detroit.
Love these guys.
There it is.
Oh, I'm sorry, Podcast Detroit.
I reversed it.